So we're live with the Node.js Build working group for the 6th of December 2022 and here to start the meeting, so I'll pass over to the build group.
Okay, so are there any announcements? I think is the normal way to start these meetings by anyone? Anything particular?
I guess I'll mention, I've been looking this morning at some weird CI results or CI jobs that seem to have run, but if you look at the summary page, there are no sort of child jobs. So if you look at like the pull request jobs or the test commit jobs, they sort of run, but then some of them are showing 0 execution time, but then in the console logs, they have started child jobs and have actually run. And I think it seems to be related to, there was an emergency droplet migration of our CI server last night.
Yeah.
So this morning I've got an email from DigitalOcean. Well, I think it was sent to the build group. I hope it was sent to the build group. And there's a gap in the graphs on DigitalOcean that's monitoring those machines, showing that for about an hour. There was like no disk activity, no bandwidth or anything. So I suspect maybe the machine was uncontactable or not running for about an hour. And that's probably messed up because I'm guessing Jenkins is relying on sort of getting messages back to work out if the jobs are completed or whatever. So I don't know. The builds that started this morning look okay. So I'm just sort of crossing my fingers and hoping it was just a temporary blip last night and it's not an ongoing problem that we need to look at. I don't believe it's related to the giant machines that were out, but you never know.
Okay.
So yeah, short story is I think we're okay at the moment, but just be aware that there are some builds that have run which they look really confusing when you look at them.
Yep. Okay. So I guess we'll just keep an eye on that during the day as things go on. See if anything else falls out from that. Right. Okay. Anything else? Any other announcements out of bounds that we're not expecting? Oh, okay. So I guess, do you want to start with the giant machines, Richard? I guess we're not quite sure where we are with those at the moment. And I guess we need a bit of input from the giant team on those.
Yeah, that's a fair summary. So it looks like starting at the beginning of December, all of the machines that are labeled giant in the CI and infrastructure went offline, and it transpires that the giant machines are actually hosted by Equinix Metal. So some history, those machines actually used to be hosted by Joint in their own data center. And a couple of years ago, they closed their data centers and there was actually an emergency sort of last minute migration from those machines that were in Joint data centers and were moved somewhere else. So I wasn't aware that they'd actually moved to Equinix Metal, but that appears to be the history. And for a while, they were administered by people at Joint. The build group didn't actually have admin console access. And then it sounds like sometime last year, the access for those machines was transferred from the Joint people to, well, it's unclear who it was transferred to. It might still be Joint people. But it's essentially in an Equinix Metal account that Build don't own. So just as more background, Build does own one Equinix Metal account and also has some machines in the Works on ARM account, which Equinix Metal has. So the Works on ARM account has the machines sponsored by ARM. So we have two machines in the test CI that ARM are sponsoring. That's in the Works on ARM project at Equinix Metal. And then we've got some other machines at Equinix Metal. At the moment, I think it's just the two Jenkins workspace machines, but they're in our own sort of Node.js account. So those are machines that Build can sort of administer, as in we can get into the admin consoles in Equinix Metal and sort of restart machines if we ever need to, or have a look at them, re-provision them if they get into really bad states. These machines labeled joint, we don't have that. We currently don't have that access. I think Brian's Brian Bennett, who used to work at Joint, he's now, I think, at MNX, which is a company that's looking after the, is it Lumos? Is that what they call the SmartOS stuff?
Yes, I think the kernel's Lumos. Yeah.
Or is it Triton? I think their product's called Triton, is it? Something like that.
The Triton was the name of the cloud, I think.
Maybe. But anyway, Brian used to have access, then didn't have access, and it sounds like Ed from Equinix has now given him access again. So, yeah, the machines are now back up. So that's the good news. The bad news is they're actually sat in Equinix data centers that are supposed to have closed. So Equinix did warn us for the machines that we did know about, that their old data centers were closing at the end of November. So we actually, over like 2 months, did a planned migration of the machines we did have. But obviously we didn't know about these machines. So, well, even if we'd known about them, we didn't have the access to do the migrations on our front. But it has revealed that in addition to the SmartOS machines, which I guess the people from Joint/MNX, they're more vested and interested in those. So yeah, I'm not opposed to them looking after those machines. But there are like 3 infrastructure machines which I frankly question whether they need to be sort of lumped in with the SmartOS machines, and maybe something we need to look at longer term, because it's possibly not great that we've got bits of infrastructure relying on machines that we actually have no sort of access to if they went down, and if we couldn't SSH into them, there's nothing we can do with those.
Yeah, I think we need to have that discussion with the Joint team that own that other account and see that certainly those 3 machines, I would have thought it made sense to migrate into the account we already have, or unless you want to move them to another provider for any particular reason.
I just don't know.
Yeah.
It's worth having the discussion, and then the sort of practicalities of how to transfer will be an interesting question. My main concern, I don't know if concern is the word, but of the 3 infrastructure servers, one of them is the backup server, and we can obviously create a new backup server and have backups going forwards, but it would be nice to have the old backups. I just don't know how feasible it would be to transfer those, because there would be storage in that account, I guess. So yeah, anyway, those machines are back up. So for the moment, things are back to, well, they appear back to normal. I haven't seen any other sort of activity that looks related to those machines being down, other than the CIs were taking a while to catch back up. But we are aware that they're in data facilities that are supposed to have closed, so they are going to have to move somewhere, whether it's within the account that they're currently in, or if some of them move over to our account.
Yeah, so I guess we can't really make any decisions on this until we talk to the Joint team that owns the other account. So yeah, that's good. So at least we have an idea of where we are now, and we know who the people to talk to are to make progress on that now, which is good, which was not where we were a day ago, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, that's completely fair.
Yeah, so I guess there's not too much extra we can say on that at the moment, is there? Anything else on that topic?
No, other than we need to have those conversations. And
yeah, so I've started a conversation between you, me, and Brian on Slack. So once they're online, because I think it's about 5 a.m. their time or something, so I wasn't expecting them to be on this call. So once they're back online, we can see if we can progress that later today, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, second thing on the agenda was the retiring the Raspberry Pi cluster, and I suspect that's going to be broadly in the same category. For those who don't know, we've got Rod Vag, who's on the opposite side of the world from us, so it's in the middle of the night his time, so he's not he doesn't join the calls at this time of the day, but he hosts a lot of the Raspberry Pis and things that we have, a lot of our ARM32 capacity that's pretty much used just for older releases now, because the newer ones we've moved on to Docker containers on some of the bigger Ampere Ultra systems that we have. And so yes, the Rod raised a issue about retiring the cluster of Pis that he has, because obviously they're hosted in his garage using his electricity and so on. And so if we don't actually need them anymore and we can replace them, then that seems like a reasonable thing to do. And I haven't seen any objections so far. So I guess, are there any concerns with doing that from anyone on this team?
No, I think the only concern will be if there's anything that wouldn't be caught by the containers, but I'm not aware that anything has cropped up. So for some background, we stood the containers up when we actually got some new the aforementioned works on ARM test machines. And we've actually been running those containers on all release lines. So even like Node 14 tests on both, it was testing on both the pies and in the containers. So we had the overlap to run them both at the same time. It was only Node 18 and onwards that weren't running on the pies. And the reason they weren't running on the pies is we needed to add new containers and we weren't able to do it remotely. So it was on Rod's to-do list and he hasn't had time to do it. And it looks like we don't, it's not going to happen. So
so even back to 14. So even back to Node 14, we have capacity in the Docker containers to be able to cover that at the moment. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, the ARM fan job, the tests, the ARM fan job was running two different test jobs. One was running on the pies and the other was running on the containers. So Rod has actually disabled the jobs that touch the Raspberry Pis, so they're not actually running in the CI at the moment. It just means that the fan job now, instead of going on to two test jobs, it's only running the one test job, which is the one that runs on the containers.
Okay.
So in terms of capacity, we are just running on the. I think we've got two containers of. Is it two Debian 10 and two Ubuntu 20? I think ARM7 containers. So we've got one of each on each test machine.
And with the size of those machines, it's fairly easy to create extra ones if we did run out of capacity, I guess.
Possibly. I'm not sure. Yeah, no, yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that I think if it's been running okay so far without any problems, we're probably in a reasonably good state at the moment. So
yeah, I think so. I've occasionally seen some jobs fail, and I don't know if that's like temporary running out of resources or I don't know, to be honest.
Okay, so we might need to keep an eye on that. And
yeah, we might need to keep an eye on it. I don't think we've seen it recently. I have seen one or two containers go offline, which has been a bit odd. Like an actual single container going offline rather than a whole lot of them. And I think we still have an issue with like one of the test machines not restarting properly, which again we've not seen too often recently. But again, yeah, I don't really have any concerns over retiring that Pi cluster other than the theoretical, it's not real hardware, but then there's other platforms that I guess we're testing on sort of virtualized cloud hardware. Then
yeah, I think that was the concern that I had as well, that we're potentially, not testing on an operating system, and a 32-bit operating system, if you like. We're running in Docker containers on a 64-bit kernel with all of those. So it may be worth evaluating whether it's worth getting some proper ARM32 capacity from somewhere else. There are some providers that can provide Raspberry Pis with real 32-bit operating systems. So that may be worth looking at as well if we get rid of it. But I guess at the moment we're running without that. So
yeah, we're running without that.
And we haven't seen any problems, I think, that have only shown up on the Raspberry Pis. That
we have, but I don't think they're related to actually being on a Pi,
right.
Or not directly. So we've had a few that are sort of timeouts in that the Pis are just slow.
Right. Yeah.
Slower. And then there's been a few that have been due to the Pis we're running on NFS mounts. So we have had a few tests that do file system stuff and do things like check stats, FS stats. So on NFS mounts, some of the stats come back as 0 because NFS doesn't export that information. So
that's something that's not going to be specific to ARM32.
Yeah, those are the kind of things we've been seeing on the Pis, and they're not specific to ARM32 as I'm aware. They're related to the actual setup. So no, I've got no objection to resign the Pi cluster. And to be honest, if we're running everything in those containers, we may at some point revisit whether the fan job makes sense. So the reason the fan job was there was we were cross-compiling in one job, actually on an Intel platform, and then copying the binaries somewhere else, and then copying those binaries from the other place into an NFS, one of the NFS servers in Rod's garage, and then fanning the sort of jobs onto the Pis. We were putting them on the NFS there to save the bandwidth of transferring the binaries around. So that's sort of additional complexity to the CI in terms of having to store temporary binaries and then download them again. We're doing them on the Windows machines as well, and that's different. The reason we do that on the Windows is we're testing on different combinations of Visual Studio and Windows operating systems, which again is not something we're doing elsewhere, but yeah, it's maybe something we can look at in the future, or maybe even as early as Node 20, which will be April, if we wanted to look at it ahead of that time. I wouldn't really want to the sort of fan at the moment is we're cross-compiling. So the ARM32 releases, we're currently compiling on an Intel platform with a cross-compiler. I'm a bit hesitant to change that for the releases that we are currently producing, but for Node 20, I'm open to possibly doing that natively, or otherwise we sort of continue what we're doing. But yeah, it's I think that's all I have to say on the Pi front. So the jobs have been disabled. So as far as I'm aware, nothing's actually running through them now. So I guess if we're happy with it, we could actually possibly start actually properly retiring them, like removing the definitions from Jenkins and taking them out of the inventory and all that.
Yep, sure. I guess has it just been disabled recently, or were they disabled previously?
It was disabled, I don't know, about maybe a week or slightly less than a week ago, shortly between Rod raising the issue.
Okay, so recently, yeah.
Yeah. I sort of commented while I was on leave, and I think he said he's disabled the two. There were two jobs. One was to update the binaries, and the other one was to actually run the tests fanned out. So yeah, I'm not aware that anything's broken since those jobs have been disabled. So yeah, looks
okay. So I guess we keep an eye on it for the next few weeks, and maybe look at decommissioning them starting January or something like that.
Yeah,
reasonable.
Sounds reasonable.
Next one on the list is the Jenkins agents need a new Java 11 plus. I think you've done some of that, haven't you, Richard? Do you know what sort of status is on that?
I think it's all done, other than some old Linux operating systems that we kind of really want to ditch from the CI. So by old operating systems, I'm talking Debian 8, Debian 9, Ubuntu 14, Ubuntu 16. I have tried taking some of them out of the CI jobs. I need to do another sweep to move to either sort of take them out of the jobs or move them onto like Ubuntu 18, or we might need to create a few Ubuntu 20 machines and move anything that was sort of running on Ubuntu 16 to either Ubuntu 18 or Ubuntu 20. But yeah, I don't really want to spend time faffing around with updating the Ubuntu like 16 machines, because really we shouldn't be running them in the CI. So yeah, I think that's the only thing left. I think anything that we want to, any of the sort of platforms that are current that we're actually releasing binaries on and testing on, those have been updated to newer Java. I think there may have been a few machines that we weren't able to get into, so some of the Macs are offline. They've not been updated, but we have validated that the playbooks do install like an updated Java, and the machines that were upgraded are running on the newer Java. So I think that's all okay. So I'm reasonably confident that once we get rid of those old obsolete operating systems from the CI, we can attempt to move the Jenkins server back onto the current sort of LTS release. And so the background for this is we're, I think, one or two versions behind, because Jenkins has now dropped support for Java 8. And unfortunately, we can't move the server there unless the agents are also updated. So that's what this issue is tracking. It's updating all the agents to something newer than Java 8 so that we can then move the server up to Java 17 probably. But yeah, that's the idea.
Did we get the SmartOS agents upgraded as well? Were they okay
yes.
with Java 11?
They were fine. They were fine. They're on Java 11, I think.
I just have a question about that.
Yep. Sure.
I read somewhere that it's recommended that the built-in node, like the one that runs the Jenkins main node, should not have a higher Java version than the other ones.
Okay.
And currently it's running on Java 17. I don't know if that may be an issue.
I run a Jenkins server for another project, and that hasn't been an issue. We moved that up to 17 some time ago, over a year ago. And we still have some agents running 8 and other versions, and it seems to be okay. So I suspect we won't have a problem with it, but that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I guess what we're running on the server just now, Richard, is it 11?
17.
17. Okay, so you're the same. Yeah, the same year as the other project.
Yeah, the servers are running Java 17. I just went to, well, at the time it was the most recent Java that's going to be that LTS release. So
indeed. Yeah, so it's a valid concern, but I haven't seen any issues directly as a result of that. So I'm expecting that it will be okay. And I mean, I guess we've been running in that situation for a while at Node as well, haven't we, Richard?
We have. And I'm not aware of any issues that we're seeing which would be related to that, but we've only just bumped the agents up. So
okay.
Yeah. Well, let's keep an eye on it, but it's worth bearing in mind, I guess.
And
yeah, how many of them have you actually? How many of the agents have you put up to 17 as well, or are some of them only bumped up to 11?
So it really depended on what was available. So, for example, I think I'm trying to remember. I think the CentOS 7, RHEL 7 machines, I think, are on Java 11. Oh no, is that true?
Yes.
No, then yeah, maybe. It was basically whatever was in the package managers. I went to what the most recent Java LTS was. So some of the older things have Java 11. Most of the new ones have Java 17. So it was a case of whatever the machines were currently doing in terms of Java. Like if they were getting it from package manager, I just flipped the package to whatever the most current Java LTS was. There were a few machines that were installing from Adoptium, I suppose, which is Adopto. No, it is Adoptium, isn't it? Those I just moved to 17. I just changed the number in the playbook from 8 to 17. And then the only other machines that we actually shifted were the Apple M1s, the Apple Silicon machines, where we've moved from the Azure JDK that Ash found. So those are now using the Adoptium M1 native binaries, the Temurin ones. So yeah, it really depended on what was available on the machines, if the machines were using package managers.
Okay, it sounds like it's in progress then. I guess the action, I guess, is to decommission some of those older machines that we're not likely to upgrade.
Yeah, and the trick isn't so much decommissioning them, because it's quite easy to just turn them off. The trick is removing them from the Jenkins jobs, because Jenkins, if you remove all the machines for a particular label, but the job still tries to run on that label, then you get the job sort of hanging, trying to schedule themselves into machines that aren't there. And then it's really difficult to remove them if there are no machines of that label, because they won't show up in the GUI when you try and edit the job. So the job will still be running on a label, but it won't show up with a tick box for you to untick if there are no machines of that label available. It's a weird quirk.
Okay. Okay, so I guess, is there anything else we need to say on that? or is that sounds like it covers pretty much everything?
No, there's nothing more to say. It is just going through all the jobs, because it's not just the node commit and pull request jobs, it's anything else running in Jenkins. So that's the libuv jobs, the node add-on API jobs, Citium jobs, all of that. So it's just a question of going through, but it's not too hard. There's 2 repositories that are currently private where we back up all the Jenkins config XML files. So it's actually quite simple to grep through that. Or you can go onto the actual CI servers themselves and grep through the job XMLs on the machines themselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fairly trivial to search for the labels that we're using to see what's still running on those machines.
Yep. Okay. I scrolled down too far in my minute, so I missed a couple of things that were on the agenda. So I'll go back. Visualize machines availability in Grafana. Was that who was it that was working on that? Was it Ulysses?
Yeah, it was me working on that. So so yeah, the idea when I got access to the to some of the machines with SSH and all of that, I detected some of the macOS machines offline. So so I came up with this proof of concept just to see if it makes any sense for us as a group to have like a Grafana dashboard kind of thing where we track which machines are available, I mean, at least online or not, what latencies they have, and potentially in the future even to see if the SSH connection is working properly or not, because I think some of the people are raising issues on that, and sometimes the machines come back and sometimes not. So so yeah, I had already a script that I use in my home lab in my home to check my devices. So I just made an open repository for that, so you can see how that looks and all. But yeah, I was not very sure if it was useful for all of us as a group, if it makes sense to include in the Grafana that we already have, or or if you are using a different method that even it's better to check out the ability of the availability of the machines. I don't know. So that was more or less the idea.
Yeah, I can't say I've got too much familiarity with Grafana as such, but I know we do have a server. I think Richard, was there some concern over licensing or anything related to the server that we already had?
So the server we've got, which actually happens to be one of those joint machines, so
yeah, indeed.
That was an interesting thing caught up. Johan set that up with a trial license for the enterprise Grafana. Mm-hmm. I think that was because he was trying to get it so that we could somehow do like teams based on GitHub teams, but I don't think he got that working. So you do log in with your GitHub ID, but I think we've had to manually assign access or roles in Grafana. But yeah, I guess I'm open to trying that stuff out if for example Ulysses is keen to eager to or volunteering to set that up. I guess it might be worth going through the question of, does that Grafana server stay where it is, or do we move it across to our account? Because if we end up having to migrate it, it might be worth holding off until we've done that migration, or maybe we just set up one up from scratch. I don't really know, but
yeah, I mean, it depends, because if we're using a trial license or something, there's a potential for that to have expired. It may just be worth starting from scratch. I don't know how much data we really have on the existing one.
I don't know if anything's been persisted. Well, I'm not that familiar with how Grafana works, or if it's been persisted, but we're not seeing it, or maybe the expired license means it's only persisting so much. I don't know. It does seem that Ash set up some disk alerts. So I think it's monitoring the CI servers and the download servers. And if we get within 95% disk capacity, there are alerts sent to I think it's Node.js Build alerts, or there's a Slack channel where there's a bot that the alerts are going to. So that actually did post an OK alert when we got the machines back up. So that suggests that the alerts are still working, or at least the sort of plumbing for the alerts is still working. I think that's the only thing I'm aware of that's we've got Grafana wired up to do, other than people just hopping into Grafana just to look at the graphs that are there. Yeah, I've got no real objections to trying that out.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I'm happy to proceed with the implementation of this when we are happy with it. So yeah, I need to figure it out also how we because in order to have that working, I think I need to have maybe some access to the current Telegraph things that we set up already, or I don't know. I need to figure it out. How is the infrastructure running? Because aside of the Grafana itself instance, there are some other servers or stuff running like Grafana, like Telegraph or things like that, that collect the metrics and send that information, and probably some InfluxDB or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm not that sure how that's been set up. It has been set up. And I can't remember. There may be some things in Ansible. I'll go away after the meeting, have a quick poke around and see if I can.
Fantastic. Yeah. Worst case scenario, I open a like a discussion on Slack to see who is aware of how that works and see if someone want to come up and support me. So okay, fantastic.
I don't think
Richard, did you set it up initially?
Johan,
okay.
Yeah, I don't think we've got any Telegraph agents running on the test machines or release machines, but we do have them running on the CI server. And I just can't remember if we Ansibled that. For some background, we have Ansible scripts for the test server and the release servers. We know those work because we're reasonably sort of regularly running. Well, not regularly. We've run them often enough that we know they sort of work. But for the infrastructure, we've got some Ansible scripts which I don't believe have ever been run on the live infrastructure. So things like the website server, there are some Ansible scripts that notionally set that up, but we've never run them on the live server because if the live server ever goes down, that's going to break a lot of the Node ecosystem. Basically, anyone trying to get Node. So we've been very conservative and hesitant to run configuration changes via Ansible on the web servers, mainly because I think those servers were set up without Ansible, and then sort of after the event, Ansible scripts were sort of retrofitted to, in theory, recreate what's already on there, but without actually validating that they would recreate what's on there. So we do have Ansible scripts for those infrastructure machines, but they're kind of like a guideline sort of reference kind of thing, rather than a we know for definite that if you run these, it would actually set those machines up. But for the test machines, so for example, if we are, if one of the suggestions is to monitor the actual individual test machines like the Macs, that probably we would want some sort of Ansible thing to set the Telegraph servers up.
Okay. Yeah, I think I have a script with Node.js roughly that take I think the inventory YAML and parse it, and just get the current machines there. So yeah, we can have like a kind of a schedule thing that refresh it. So if we change the inventory, it will change the current machines at this point in out. But yeah, okay.
That sounds interesting. Yeah. All right.
Okay, so next one on the list is 10.x deprecation. I guess that's is that stuff that has Ulysses been working on that, or?
Yeah, I think I raised the concerns. Yeah, because I was, as I was trying to connect to all the macOS machines and all of that, so I just by chance saw that in terms of lifetime of the versions, I think 10x are already kind of deprecated. But yeah, there was a lot of replays, I think, so potentially makes sense to at least, what is currently working, keep them live, but maybe the point is later on start to see if we can have macOS 11 and 12 or 13 running, and then gradually start deprecating the 10x versions if we are happy with those with that idea. But yeah. I don't know, maybe that makes sense. So there are any, super concerns to keep the 10x versions running?
So so the way we compile the binaries for macOS is there's there's a minimum deployment target. So wherever we're actually compiling the binaries, which for some of the older releases is macOS 10.15. I think the Apple Silicons are all on macOS 11 because that was the first one that supported Apple Silicon. But there's a minimum deployment target. So for Node 14, that's macOS 10.13. I think Node 18 is 10.15, and I can't remember where. Node 16 is one of the two. I think it might be the earlier one. I think 18 may have been the one where we switched it to 10.15. But in theory, that means that people that are running those versions of macOS, again, with the so one of the complications we've got with macOS is, unlike other operating systems, which actually formally declare how long they're supported for and the actual firm date that the support ceased, macOS seems to be kind of woolly in that Apple don't actually declare any sort of formal dates, and it's just eventually they stop releasing updates for a particular line. So I think I did see a website you linked to, which kind of is now assuming that 10.15 is end of life because the last set of security updates Apple didn't update 10.15, which may be a fair assumption, but there's no formal definitive statement saying that 10.15 is end of life because Apple doesn't do that, which makes it a bit woolly and difficult to plan from our side. Like for our LTS releases, we kind of say that we support these releases and then try and sort of keep them roughly static. There is a proviso that end of life operating systems would be supported, but it is also tied with the, well, if we're building binaries on this platform, we really don't want to be moving that just because it's risky. If we're building binaries on a particular release of, let's say macOS, for example, there's a non-zero chance that if in the middle of a release we put it onto a later one, even with the deployment target, that may cause an unforeseen compatibility issue. It may not be, but we've always erred on the side of caution in build. So yeah, there's the what we're building binaries on, and what's the minimum version of macOS we support. So what I suggested in the issue is, in the past we have periodically, with new Node versions, bumped up that minimum deployment target, which means that we can eventually roll the older macOS releases, out. So at the moment, we have macOS 10.14 machines around because we've not had 10.13 machines. So 10.14 was the earliest ones we've had in the CI, but ostensibly they're there so that we can run test CI on an earlier version of macOS than 10.15. I could be swayed either way about retiring 10.14 from the, from the CI. I'm not. I'm not sort of adamant that we have to keep the 10.14 machines around, but the 10.15 machines I think we need to keep around. Well, I think we will need to keep those around for the near future. We're still building the Intel macOS binaries for Node 18 on macOS 10.15, so I'd be really hesitant to move those somewhere else. But we might look. So the next LTS release of Node will be Node 20, which is due out in April. So we've got a couple of months to decide. Maybe we bump up the minimum deployment target, and possibly also move compiling the release binaries from macOS 10.15 to either macOS 11 or macOS 12 for Node 20, and that would just mean that we'd be able to retire, say, 10.15 from the CI matrix earlier, around the time that Node 18 goes end of life, rather than waiting the extra year for Node 20. So yeah, it was kind of like the macOS versions. There's a bit of guesswork involved, but part of it is the minimum deployment target, which we're kind of trying to guess what people are actually running and what can we feasibly be running in the sort of 3 years later scenario. And we may be in a situation where at the back end of Node 18's life, 10.15 is definitely dead, but we might want to keep it running just to produce those binaries in the same way that we've been doing at the moment. So that's where the sort of balancing act is to, what are we building on for each release line, and sort of evaluating whether we need to move it up. And moving it up is obviously then a balance between what are we able to support in terms of build, what can we keep running in the build infrastructure, and then the expectations, I guess, from the community, like, what versions of macOS are people that are using the Node binaries and macOS running. I suspect Apple probably is pushing people to be on, the recent macOS releases, so they're probably going to be on latest -1, possibly latest -2. But yeah, I don't know what the figures are. I would be a bit surprised if we had a huge amount of people on, say, 10.14, because that is quite a few versions back.
So I guess this is a general question about, finding the right environments for Node.js 20, right?
Yes.
Do we have an issue covering that yet in terms of making those sorts of decisions, which I guess would cover
we probably don't, but we probably should create one, or otherwise we could have a project or something and stick everything in a project. I think projects can be organization wide, which means we could actually potentially throw actual core issues in there if that's the way the TSC wanted to handle things. But yeah, there's a different way. We definitely should start. In core, I think the PR has that landed, or is it's still open to move to C++ 20?
I opened it and it's still open.
Okay. But I mean,
I don't remember why.
Yeah. It's okay. But that's probably something we'd probably be targeting for Node 20. And there's been a few other people in the Red Hat I've spoken to that are working on the V8 ports. And for a while, they've been asking about moving to a newer version of GCC, because upstream V8s are kind of they're kind of pushing to move towards like C++ 20. And what I've been told is there have been a few issues been found in GCC 8 with some of the things that upstream V8 are running or using. So it may be, I'll open another issue for this. We may want to move to GCC 10, at least to build the release binaries on. So again, this might be planning for Node 20. So sort of the two are not they don't both have to happen, but they kind of both might happen in the sort of a move to C++ 20 and possibly moving to GCC 10 over GCC 8. We wouldn't need to move the glibc version as far as I'm aware, so we still build on RHEL 8 mostly for Linux. So we wouldn't be changing the platforms that you'd be able to run Node on, but it would probably be a recommendation rather than a hard check. So the configure script, I'd probably update that to check if you're on GCC 10, warn you if you're not, but still attempt to compile if you're on an older GCC. And that would be a sort of reasonable, I think, halfway house between moving up to GCC 10, but also allowing people to compile on GCC 8 or 9 if that's what their operating system is running. But then they'd be taking the risks themselves. I think GCC 8 isn't getting updates from GCC anymore, so that's one reason to plan for moving off GCC 8 at some point, and 20 might be the opportunity to do it. Otherwise, it would be the one after that, I guess. And the reason I'm suggesting 10 is we know that all the platforms we use GCC to compile in, we have GCC 10. There are a few platforms, some of the IBM platforms, for example, that don't have GCC 11 yet. So I kind of would prefer to keep them all on the same version of GCC. It simplifies things. But yeah, I guess I'll open an issue and we'll have a discussion and build.
Yeah, it's going to be, as you say, a discussion about a larger issue for what we're going to support for Node 20 in terms of build and target environments, which compilers and so on. So yeah, it seems like the right time to start those sorts of discussions in the open. So
definitely. Node 20 will be in April, so we really want everything nailed down by March at the latest, but preferably sort of February. February, I would be.
Yeah, we definitely need to get going now, that's for sure.
It's more identifying if we do need work to do, because then we need to go to plan to do that work.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Next one on the list is request to join the build work group, which I think, Michael, I think you've pretty much been accepted, haven't you? Is there any formalities that we need to go through to do that, Richard? Do you know?
Probably not.
Some things already, haven't you?
Yeah, I think the access has been given to everything, and to be honest, I guess if there's anything that crops up where access isn't there, we can follow it up in other issues, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't tried everything regarding access.
That's fine. I don't particularly expect you to try everything, but at least the things you've tried to do, I think you've got access to. So I'm happy to declare that done, I guess. I can't even remember if we ever closed the issue for you if you were off. No, that's just one of the we're not very good at closing issues off things. But yeah, probably definitely doesn't need to be on the agenda anymore because you're in.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I can close that issue, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. Welcome, Targos.
Thank you.
Or do you want us to refer to you as Targos or Michael, or how do you?
As you want.
Okay.
And Ulysses. I mean, there was the other issue that Ulysses opened. So yeah, I think that wasn't on the issue. Yeah, okay, it's not on the agenda, but that's fair enough. Or maybe that was closed off. I can't remember.
I think it was closed. Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
LL Node builds. Do you know anything about that, Richard? It's not something I've been following in the slightest.
Yeah. Okay, that's fallen off my radar. Anton Wally was he's started sort of an effort up again to get LL Node maintained. So LL Node for a while, the maintainers sort of there weren't sort of active maintainers maintaining LL Node, but Anton's now taken that on. So he's raised this issue asking about testing LL Node, because I think some of the tests they've got are too I think they're either running out of memory or something. They're not. They're trying to run them into GitHub Actions, and it's not succeeding or something. It's possible that whatever they're testing is too much for the action runners.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
So they've asked. LL Node used to be tested in Jenkins, so there were some Jenkins jobs. May still be Jenkins. I can't remember if I deleted them or not. I had some back and forth with Anton, and then it's fallen off my radar. So it's been probably months or weeks since I last spoke to him. It's squaring a sort of what do they need, and then setting them up with the access, I guess, to look after. To either create them a job that they can edit or give them access to create the job. We just need to be careful about where those jobs are running and whether we have, for example, Mac OS. We don't really at the moment have the disk space on the nearfield machines to run more Mac OS jobs.
Yes, that's true.
So we just need to be careful on that front. But otherwise, we had LL Node jobs running in the CI in the past. I don't object to it if people are volunteering, Anton in this case, to look after those jobs. So I guess that's worth keeping on here, is just to make sure we don't forget about it. So I'll maybe reach out and see if see what he needs, and I presume the GitHub runners situation hasn't changed. So it's finding something for them to get LL Node tested.
Yep. Okay. The next thing on the agenda is the onboarding of. Not sure what that person's name is. Feng Yu. I don't really know too much about that person at the moment. Or
No, I don't. I don't either. I
Could
think
try
they
that one.
I think they volunteered to join the build group when they were onboarded as a Node collaborator, and they were fairly new
Ah, yes, that
when
one.
they
Yeah.
were onboarded as a Node collaborator. So I'm not even sure if I've seen them active recently, but yeah,
Okay.
I don't really know what's going on there. Probably nothing's going on there because no.
Yeah. Okay. So nothing too much to discuss here. We could possibly see if they're still interested, and
Yep.
if so, see what the story is. Okay. Cool. So the one there's only
There's two more. Well, three more.
yeah.
more.
So interesting. How the build helper role, is that still ongoing? We've done some things with
Nothing's
AWS.
the build helper role. So that the idea is we have an Ansible Tower instance or whatever it's called now, AWX.
AWX is a free one. Yeah.
Ash set that up. There is a I don't know what you call it in Tower. There's a thing you can run that will restart the Jenkins agents. And that's as far as we've gone. There has been some suggestions, for example, possibly adding something for the release team to flush the cache for the website. So sometimes we've had to do that so that the website refreshes itself when we the old blog updates. But no work has been done on that. So it's it's on the agenda. I don't think any work has been done on it since. So I think it's one of those nice to haves in that the idea of the AWX thing was to see if there were common tasks that the build team were doing that potentially other people could be doing if they had access. That wasn't necessarily giving them complete access to the build infrastructure, and like restarting the Jenkins agents was one. I guess it's something that we can look at if we have spare cycles.
Okay, so I guess this is kind of just on the agenda, I guess, so we can discuss if there's anything else that people would particularly like to see on it as much as anything else.
Yeah, it's suggestions for things that could be done via Tower, and then the actual work needed to get that working.
Yep. Okay, so if you have any ideas, either raise them here or in that issue, I guess. It's the easiest thing to do. Right, the next thing was the Windows and ARM64 binaries. So I guess I probably know more about that than anyone else. We don't have the Linaro people on this call, but we've been making reasonable progress on that, and we're at the stage where they're running through okay. There was a couple of the jobs seem to be running through with yellow unstable statuses, despite the fact that they were in some cases only failing flaky tests, and it wasn't quite clear why we were getting that.
That would be normal. If a test only has failures and the failures are in the flaky set, then the jobs are unstable. But they should fail.
My guess was that some of the ones that had real failures or looked like real failures were also showing up as yellow, so they were indistinguishable from the flaky ones.
Yeah, so that would be unexpected. An actual failure that's not flaky should fail the build.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to need to look at that at the moment. So I still haven't enabled the ARM64 ones by default. We're still sitting with just the two machines there. So we have we'll need to see what the capacity is if we actually enable that fully. But I think at the moment I've got to kind of hold off on that until we can make sure that some of those non-flaky tests are sorted out. I'm not sure there's too much more that needs to be said on that, but that's been making good progress recently, so that's good. Unless anyone else has any particular comments on that. The only thing I suppose related to that would be whether we want to start moving to building natively in the pipelines as opposed to the cross-compiling and fan jobs that we have at the moment. I think my preference would be to compile natively. We have tested that in separate pipelines from the main node test once that does work.
My concern would be if the ultimate goal of this is to get ARM64 Windows binaries. I think we're some way off that yet, but
sure.
If the ultimate aim is that a binary ends up on Node.js or org that's the Windows and ARM binary, the question then is that cross-compiled or natively compiled? If it's natively compiled, it implies we need a release.
We need the systems, absolutely,
yeah. So at the moment we don't have a release machine, so that would be my reservation. The reason to do the cross compilation is if then we would release binaries, in the future, cross-compiled on an Intel. We definitely have Intel Windows machines. So that would be my only concern about the fans sort of, cross-compiling and then testing natively versus the build everything natively. I agree, build everything natively would be simpler, but long term, if we are planning that release binaries, we have to kind of consider where the release binaries are going to be built. If they're cross-compiled, we probably want to keep the fan stuff. If they're native, then we could potentially move it. And again, that then is possibly reliant on the available resource and hardware.
Yeah, I think regardless of which way we go with that, we're going to need some extra capacity one way or another. And I think we probably need to have a word with Microsoft again and just see what the status is of that and whether they'll be able to provide more within their cloud. I think that would probably be a prereq for getting us any closer to being a official release.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's everything that was on the agenda, unless I've missed anything.
There were two things below that on the agenda. There's one about large runners on GitHub CI.
Yep.
And then the one about the GitHub bot. I guess you ignore that for the moment because I don't think there's anything any of us can do on that. So
Okay.
just as a bit of background, we have a repository that's private that has secrets that the build team owns. So they have things like logins to admin consoles. And one of the areas in that repository is for the GitHub bot. So the GitHub bot, we're running a server, and then we're running I think it's written in Node. We're running a sort of program that's actually the GitHub bot. So it does things in the CI and posts into PRs and things. But I don't have access to those secrets. There's a small handful of people that do. And that issue's open because it might be nice to actually have access to the full set of secrets. For example, I couldn't say with any confidence I'd ever be able to recreate that server if it ever went down for whatever reason, because I think there are secrets in there that we would need to actually get that server running. Like, I guess it's like tokens and stuff. But I don't know because I can't see what's in that. I can see the files in that repository. I can't see what's in the files in the repository because they're GPG encrypted. So I'm only guessing that the stuff in that repository is the actual required information needed to be able to recreate it. So that's just a whole. We kind of feel that everyone in builder infrastructure should have access to those secrets, but at the moment it's only a small handful of people. So that's the GitHub bot issue. I can't remember why the large runners thing is on build agenda.
It was removed from the TSC agenda about a month ago, apparently. So maybe it's been moved.
Okay. Rich put it on there, but he's obviously not here. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything to be said on that. I think Mary at one point in the past suggested running a self-hosted runner, but I don't think anyone's actually done any further investigation on that.
I can say something about this.
Yeah, sure.
So I was the one who tried to create a large runner when I think everyone in the TSC got the email that we got access from GitHub to that feature. And well, it didn't work. And the GitHub UI says that runners are shut down due to spending limit caps being reached. And then if you go to billing, actually it's understandable because we don't have any credit card or anything to pay for GitHub because we have
we were given
unlimited access to some of the features. But it's like currently it's a limitation of how GitHub billing works. It's not possible to use those runners without a credit card.
So that from that point of view, in terms of running on GitHub infrastructure, I don't think that's anything really to do with build, because most of the admin of the GitHub stuff is, I guess, the TSC/Foundation. build itself isn't directly involved in anything on GitHub Actions, runners, or workflows at the moment.
No, I agree.
It will be a different issue if we were to self-host a runner. I have reservations about self-hosting a runner because it's another set of things we would then need to learn and be able to keep on top of. And I guess we would then want it on a separate machine to prevent any sort of, access.
Yeah, it's a big security issue.
It's taken on a lot of responsibilities in running a self-hosted runner, and I'm also slightly aware of we have had attempts to run crypto miners on the Node core repository and GitHub Actions. So again, it's kind of stuff we but yeah, I'm not going to block if people want to investigate doing self-hosted runners. I'm not going to block them from doing that. Equally, if there's a way we can get GitHub to allow us to run the runners, notwithstanding the billing issue, that might be the more preferable way to go, because I suspect that you'd have a lot more maintainers that way, I guess, or no, maybe a lot's the wrong word, but it will be a more sort of standardized thing, if that's the word. It's more like build is much smaller than, say, the TSC in terms of looking after things. And if it's something in Actions, then potentially it's not just the small handful of build people that would be looking at it. So yeah, I don't know, maybe we'll have to touch back with Rich to see if he had any other ideas as to why this issue was on here. Because other than perhaps self-hosted runners, I'm not sure what else build would be doing, because we don't even have things like the tokens. The tokens are all TSC administered because they require access to the organization, which the wider build team doesn't have. So I do, because I'm on the TSC, but
I think I will try to look at the YouTube recording of the TSC meeting.
Okay.
And maybe there's an explanation to why it was handed down to us.
Yeah.
To build. Yeah.
That sounds good. Let us know when you find out.
Okay. I guess the only other question I've got then, assuming that we're done with that, is meeting times and whether we need to, whether this works out for everyone. I guess one of the issues we've got is hosting this. So I think Michael is the only person on build who can actually host calls. So we got Beth to start this for us. So we've got two issues. One is, are the times suitable? Because one of the times is like really late at night for people in Europe. It does suit Rod. So if there was a possibility that that Rod could attend some of these, I don't mind having the odd one or two in that late time slot. But equally, I don't want to have that late time slot if the only reason that's there is for.
Yeah, so I think possibly before each one we should touch base with Rod and see if he's able to do one of the time slots, and then make the decision on exactly when to have it. Because at the moment I think we're just kind of cycling through the different times, aren't we?
We've got two, yeah. We've got this slot and the late slot, and they alternate. And the meetings are every 3 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
So we're alternating on a 3-weekly basis. It's just the until like this meeting and possibly the last one, we've had a long history of just cancelling meetings because either people aren't turning up or we don't have someone available to host the meeting. But now Michael and Ulysses are here, and if we want to get the Linaro people into one of these meetings, which I think we've not managed yet.
They've been in one of them. They were in one of them before.
But we might sort of evaluate, I guess, the meeting times, whether they make sense. I mean, we may leave them as they are, but then we might also need to think about, being able to host them, because it's probably unfair to ask someone like Beth or someone else to just hang around just to start the meeting and then disappear.
Absolutely, yeah. So Ulysses and Michael, would you be able to make one that was sort of a lot later than this, like sort of 9 hours on from now, 9 or 10 hours on? Or was that something you generally wouldn't be able to do?
Can we take this offline and have
9 hours from now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that will be like
no.
Fair enough. Well, it's 11 p.m. for Richard and I, so it's not ideal at all. So, okay.
Given how late it is for us, I imagine it'd be even worse for you. You're ahead of us, aren't you?
Yeah.
So.
Indeed. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. So we'll have a think about that before the next one. Which I guess when will the next ones be scheduled? It's probably between
3 weeks
just
from now.
before
So
New
it's
Year,
probably
isn't
going to
it?
be in that Christmas week.
Yeah, so
one's going
that
to be
one
around for.
probably won't happen anyway. So
It'll be on the It's on the foundation calendar, or it should be on the foundation calendar.
Yeah,
so the foundation calendar.
yeah, indeed. Okay. Anything else we need to discuss? We're slightly over time now, obviously. So
I have a side comment.
Yep.
I have some issues with Orca in terms of connectivity. I mean, I was already on the VPN and all, and suddenly, I just lost the connection with Orca. So it rejected my connection when I was there. And then since then, I have some like SSL certifications problem. I tried to connect from, outside of my network from like a DigitalOcean droplet just to see if it was a DNS problem on my machine or something, which can happen eventually. And seems like I cannot connect to Orca. So I'm not very sure if, just the certify expired on the same moment that I was connected, half an hour connected, or if it's something else. I'm not very sure, I was waiting hopefully like in a few days it will fix up or something, but seems like not. I'm not very sure rebooting it or, supporting, or it's the first time that happened or passed in the past. I don't know.
it's not something I remember happening. So I guess that'd be one that we could possibly reach out to Ash on and see if he knows anything on that, if he's seen it before.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I have opened an issue for that. I passed it in the chat. So if anyone want to have a look, that will be fantastic. Okay, great.
Okay, anything else?
No, nothing from me.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Is Beth still on the call to shut it down? Or
Yep, I'll just click end, so all good.
Yep. Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.